Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Drawngeon for the Nintendo Switch. And as you can probably tell by the bit of a play on words for the title, Drawngeon is a indie game dungeon crawler that's based almost purely around the pen and ink aesthetic. And while the game actually does have a lot to offer, it's one of those games that doesn't really seem to have that much to offer. Which is possibly why deciding if this is going to be a good game to invest your time in might be a more difficult decision than you might have originally thought. Starting off with the story in Drawngeon, we kind of don't really have a story to start off with. Some tower has arisen in a place and you're a person, and that's honestly about all we get to go on. There's no overarching guidance either before the game or after you get into game, and there's very few NPCs that have very little to offer as far as conversation's concerned. So whatever story-esque motivations you can put together for yourself as you play through this pen and paper themed dungeon crawler will be pretty much your own original story. The gameplay though is pretty much exactly what we would expect from a dungeon crawler. With grid-based movement, you'll be able to navigate through the basic towns, entering several different dungeons, using your left joystick to move yourself left, right, forward, and backward, and your L and R triggers to turn left and right. Other than that, there are actually a handful of buttons to use to navigate through all the game's different commands, such as your LC trigger to open your items menu, and your directional keys to access your items in different ways. RZ will expand your mini-map, and your general action keys of A, B, X, and Y will be used to interact, attack, defend, and so on and so forth. One unique feature of Drawngeon, though, is that there's very few things actually blocking your path to progress other than the occasional minion, meaning that you can pretty much start at any of several different dungeons and work your way up to the harder and harder floors from the very beginning of the game. Of course, enemies will get harder as you go, and there are one or two different locked doors, which may or may not excite certain players that Drawngeon actually has a roguelike element. Apparently, you're not exactly just supposed to dive into the game and beat it in one go. So even though you do spend a moderate amount of time designing your character and picking between a couple of different classes, you're more or less expected to get killed pretty early in the game, but you do get a couple of points to bring back with you to help outfit your character for a little bit of a better start on your next try. If you do manage to eke out a couple of kills on some of these dungeon monsters, though, you will get your first couple of levels in the game pretty quickly, which not only nets you some experience points, but a couple of skill points to start filling out the in-game skill tree. Each of the in-game skills is relatively cheap. One level gets you one skill point, and most of the game's in-game skill buffs cost one skill point. However, there are some that provide a much larger advantage than others. One thing that you might immediately notice in Drawngeon, other than the pretty awesome graphics, is the fact that you have an incredibly limited inventory. And so until you devote some skill points to expanding your inventory, or you unlock the skill to actually eat items and regain health, you'll probably be doing a lot of this, just reshuffling items to try and make sure you're not leaving anything good behind in a dungeon. However, for better or worse, once you clear out a mob in a certain area of a dungeon, or in the dungeon in total, they don't respawn even after leaving. So if you do play dungeon crawlers like I do, like a wild kamikaze barbarian, you can go through, kill everything, leave all of the items, search for anything that might be hidden, and then just come back later when you feel like it. Moving on from the general mechanics of the game, obviously the visuals in Drawngeon are going to be a huge draw for certain gamers. They do really well represent that hand-drawn graphic sort of feel in every sense of the expression. And on that point, while some people might actually see the audio as being fairly deficit because there's really no soundtrack and it's just more this ominous howling of the wind, if you really pay attention to the audio sounds, certain actions make the sounds of ruffling paper or turning pages or scratching of a pen, and it just really subtly reintroduces that tabletop gaming kind of vibe. And so in that sense, the sound effects are pretty decent, but the in-game slashing and defense and destruction sound effects, as well as some of the enemy noises, are pretty repetitive. So that, plus the complete lack of a gaming soundtrack, might be a bit of a turnoff for some people. And as it appears that we've already moved past the game's general mechanics and past the audio and visuals, it's time to start introducing some of the game's critiques. First off, though, I would like to address my opening statement at the beginning of the review, saying that Drawngeon has a lot to offer, but just doesn't seem to have very much to offer. Your character grows and evolves as you go, and especially if you unlock the eating items skill and then the second skill to gain abilities from items, you can evolve your character endlessly. And as you can sell items to get gold, and 1 gold coin gives you 1 HP of health back, you can essentially become a godlike juggernaut. And if you played the game for more than a couple hours, you probably figured out something like that for yourself. Other than those certain hidden intricacies, which really I wish the developer had advertised a little bit more to draw some attention to the game, there are a few negatives. One of them is that Drawngeon was originally a PC game, and it becomes very obvious in the overcomplicated control system. There is a huge wealth of buttons to press just to navigate through menus and figure out how to sort items out. And you will be dropping and picking up or accidentally using or accidentally eating items, pretty much just out of either confusion or reflex for how you're used to using a Nintendo-type console. And to a point, some of the overcomplication with actions and accessing menus does make it much easier to play the game with a touchscreen. So if you are more of a docked console-style gamer, then that probably is going to be a pretty big turnoff. But past the complicated controls, one of the biggest drawbacks for the game, or probably one of the big impedances for enjoyment, other than the fact that there's really no driving story and absolutely nothing to push you forward in your Dungeness quest, is the fact that certain gaming mechanics, once you get within certain thresholds, really do kind of break the game. When you become so OP that nothing can touch you, and considering that you can completely conquer every single dungeon in the game in just a handful of hours, even though it's beautiful, even though it's fun, even though it has a lot of intricacies to try and pilot and figure out, within probably the first 45 minutes of gameplay, you may start feeling like there's just not that much there. But if you like the retro aesthetics, if you like exploring on your own in a classic retro style with zero hand-holding and no explanations, then it might actually be a pretty good time dipping your toes into this little pen and ink world. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review of Drawngeon now on the Nintendo Switch, and pretty often on sale. So if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw me a like or a comment to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. There are new and unique indie games coming out literally every single day, so whether it's an easy hard pass or an absolutely unforgettable gem, chances are, if it's on the eShop, you're gonna find it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.